if we had been having this conversation 10 years ago, the chances are that any third person, any non-specialist coming to join the conversation, if they'd heard us talking about animation, their immediate assumption would have been we were talking about the entertainment industry. But if you take, for example, if you take the data out of an MRI scanner and you feed that into a 3D program, then if a surgeon puts on a virtual reality headset and explores the geometry, she can look at a damaged circulatory system or examine a tumor before the patient is even on the operating table. So if you look in the urban planning industry, another of the reasons that it's important for people to know how to draw is that an architect or a city planner is paid to create a two-dimensional design that will become a real three-dimensional environmental space. Because there was a period where CAD or computer-aided design really took over from traditional observation, I was approached by somebody who had been to the same art college in Scotland after I'd done a presentation about my book on layout. And he said, would you come and do drawing workshops for us with our architects and urban planners? Because as a result of the emphasis on the computer, we have a whole generation of urban planners who have no spatial awareness because they're thinking already in a virtual perspective, in a kind of limitless environment in the computer, and they can't relate that. So a lot of really unworkable, unlivable spaces have been created because they haven't the tradition of looking at three-dimensional information and turning it into a two-dimensional drawing, so that they can then take a two-dimensional plan and turn it into a real world thing. All the way through, the Fleischer brothers in the 1930s were making animated films to explain to the general public how Einstein's theory of relativity was going to impact society. The Disney studios in World War II were effectively taken over by the US military, and they spent the entire war not only making propaganda films, but making films about bombing techniques, venereal disease, malaria, all of the things that the armed forces needed to know. And then as a follow-on from that in the 50s, artists like Ken O'Connor and animators like Ward Kimball worked with the American space program to develop some of the first ever visualizations of deep space exploration, which helped encourage the people in charge of the funds in Washington to pay for us to go to the moon. And a lot of people are unaware of the fact that even while animation does give us movies like Pinocchio, the same artists who gave us Pinocchio were responsible for the moving images that made these scientists realize that if they used animation to communicate this, people who otherwise might not be able to imagine why this or that scientific or technological advance was important could go, ah, now I see. And I think that's where you arrive at that idea that when we say in English, I see, very often we mean I understand. So it's that thing that seeing and understanding are very, very closely related. And science and art it's crazy to separate them. If we had Leonardo da Vinci now, he would be streamed out of existence in most education systems because he would have to choose. You are either going to be an engineer or a musician. You're either going to be a poet or... I mean, he was somebody that designed weapon systems for the Sforzas. He was a guy that also sang beautifully. He was a fantastic draftsman. But we've developed, in most countries, an education system that says, well, you can be this or that, but you can't be both. And I think, again, that where animation is so important and where visual effects are so important is not just in reflecting how things are, but encouraging people to imagine and look forward to all the positive things that could be in helping to solve, you mentioned global warming, or there are issues to do with what's happening with resistance to antibiotics, all that kind of stuff. There's a huge long history of medical visualization, industrial visualization, that taps into exactly the same skills. So I think they all complement one another.